Hello and welcome to another episode of The Conversation with me, Amanda de Cadenet. This week's show is a first because my friend Rachel Hall is joining to co-host with me. Rachel is a personal development coach and one of the sane and trusted voices in my life. Together, we're speaking to the wonderful author Jed Jenkins about his brand new book, Mother Nature, which was days away from coming out when we spoke. Here's our conversation. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm going to try to leave some space for you.
Okay.
Just jump in.
All right.
Because I will jump in because I think fast and I know this amazing man does.
Yeah.
So something that I experienced this summer was I fell in love with nature in a very enriched way. I went to Japan, I went to Europe, and I discovered forest bathing and all this incredible relationship and dialogue and narrative around nature. I was thinking about you and I was thinking about, you've been aware of the calibrating effects of nature for such a long time, but why is your relationship to nature so significant?
I was just thinking about this because I went on a date with a cutie and he's like, I don't like nature. But he is from China. Okay. And I think he's from a cold city of China. And it makes me think that, and I remember another friend of mine years ago, he's from St. Louis and he's like, I don't like hiking. We don't really do that. It's flat and it's just hiking is not a thing. So I do think there is depending on your culture and where you live and the environment around you, it can influence I think all people benefit from nature, but I think your exposure to it influences your appreciation of it. I grew up on a farm in Middle Tennessee, beautiful 4 seasons, rolling hills. My parents would kick me out of the house and lock the door. So I had to be outside and I would go down to the creek and just wade in the creek and catch turtles and obsessed with pulling up rocks and rolling over logs to see what was underneath. And I think that now I'm sure there is some kid who could be raised on a farm who just wants to sit inside and read books and scroll TikTok and hates ticks and being outside. I'm sure that exists.
For sure.
But whatever epigenetic experience of me being exposed to nature and my curiosity, those two things combined, it just became a place that my insatiable curiosity was unlimited. There was no end to what I could learn. The book doesn't end. You just keep looking closer. You look at a field, you get closer to a tree, you get closer to the ground, you turn up a leaf, you look closer at the caterpillar, there's an ant. No matter how long you stay there and lean in, it gets more interesting. There was a quote, just told me this, which was, if you ever lack inspiration, if you ever are lethargic or writer's block or whatever, go outside, go into nature and notice something very small and you will be inspired. Go very close.
Macro.
Yeah. And it's very cute. I think also just stare at a flower and watch the bumblebee, how chubby he is trying to collect pollen and fly. And it's just, so why is nature so important to me? What is my relationship to nature? It was just the first insatiable source of curiosity for me. And I think as you grow up, we live in such a busy, high-tech, always available world. And there's so much noise and responsibility that the purity of the natural environment where, especially when you're camping and your phone doesn't work, your brain is just there.
It's
present. Nowhere else. And that is a feeling I'm always trying to get back to.
It's a force that slows us down, where our phones and our technology and our roads and our streetlights speed us up constantly. There is this forced halt in nature.
Yeah. Well, I would posit or guess that has something to do with our social brains. So much like the human brain is so big and complicated because we evolved to be social animals. And the social brain is so taxing. And analyzing someone's face, like, are they mad at me? What was the tone of this email? Oh God, like, how do I respond to this? Like, they're moving the baby shower. Like, oh God, is this a dramatic thing? And when you're in nature, especially alone or in a small group, like nature is not activating that social anxiety. It's just you take it on its own terms. And so that part of your brain relaxes, which is why I think it's so relaxing. If you think about it, almost every other thing that is busy about being a human is social. It's family dynamics, it's work dynamics, it's renewing your car registration because the police are going to come after you. Like it's all society-based things, which is very taxing. And nature removes that for a minute.
It actually sounds like meditation. I mean, when you were describing like focusing on the flower or the bumblebee, it was like, oh yeah, well I'm doing like this meditation course right now on an app. And, so much of it is just, as Rachel said, slowing down and dialing out so much activity in the brain to just get still.
Stillness is just it's something we want, but it's so hard to prioritize because anxiety makes us think that if you stop and slow down, someone's going to pass you or some ball in the air is going to drop. And I think existence and human life is just so rich with metaphors that are teaching us the wisdom of how to be and the simple truth of you exhale and you inhale in equal measure. And if you only exhale, if it's only output and it's only worrying about everyone else and it's only keeping all the balls in the air and there is no inhale, you're not breathing and you're not living.
What do you do to make sure that you have time to allow that space? Because you're busy, like right now, you're gearing up to put a book out. You've written the book. You teach your workshops. You've got a busy life. How do you create that space for you to keep exhaling?
Well, my life is unusual. I'm a full-time writer. And so I have a lot of inhale. Like my general year is inhale. And like, even when I'm writing, I only write in the morning when my brain works and early morning into late morning to lunch. Do we need to wait for that?
Yeah. Thank you. You're a pro. You're a pro.
It's great to hear. I can tell how shotgun this mic is.
I know.
If I go here.
Yeah.
It's
you're so right.
I wonder if that's a complexity of having an office in this building is it's like so New York-y sounding outside, which is kind of cool.
I know. We'll find out because this is the first one.
This building is okay.
You only write. I said, how do you make time for yourself?
Yeah. So I write in the morning when a book is due and like a book, but that's only a few hours in the morning. My life has an incredible amount of free time. It is not I don't know how to tell anyone else how to live because I have been lucky enough and it's been random enough that my skill set ties to something where I go into nature, I camp all the time. And I can write in the morning and then get in my Jeep and I live in LA. I can go to the desert that day and sleep out there one night and stargaze and come back in the morning before traffic. And it's like, that was incredible. And so I have built myself a life around that inhale because I do believe artists and particularly writers, their job is to inhale more because we are meant to analyze what's going on. We are meant to think about, and you have to have time. Fran Lebowitz, who's a hero of mine, she says, writers need to be bored. They need to be sitting at cafes, talking shit with their friends and smoking cigarettes a lot because that is where ideas come from. You're like bitching and analyzing life. And that if you're constantly working and you're constantly writing and you're constantly outputting, then you're just actually chasing the paycheck and the relevance rather than actually being a
channel,
rather. Yeah. A actual absorbing the truth of the universe and letting the dust settle. I mean, I feel ever since the first true I would say, like adult international trauma that I felt was the election of Donald Trump, where like it was so existentially stressful that I couldn't think about anything else. I couldn't do anything but read the news. I was just like, wow, this is the end of society. And that,
I mean, it kind of was as we knew it, but anyway.
And then there's, you know, the subsequent, and there was this before, but the subsequent, like when there is breaking news and then the pressure to have a hot take or take a stance immediately on your social media about something. And I always think about like, I'm a writer, like my job, and that this isn't devoid of criticism, is to let the dust settle and then have something to say, like not be breaking news.
And that is not social media.
No,
it's not.
I use social media in a strange way. Like I post incredibly long, like novel captions on my Instagram, which I didn't know anyone would read. My posts are not about today. You know, they're like very rarely. And so it's just like, I'm just doing something at the beat of my own drum, because I deeply believe that my job is to zoom out and look at the big picture and stay calm so that my frontal cortex works and I'm not just in the limbic, like freaking out. And that's my role. And that's not everyone's role. We need people freaking out. We need people on the front lines.
Yeah, sure. But you feel like you've created a space that works for you.
Yeah.
And your life and how you want to spend your time.
Yeah. And so I don't tell anyone else to do that.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm like, no, we need people who are marching in the streets demanding justice right now. We need that. And I will march too. But my role is to be a calm reflector.
I love that. To be a calm reflector. Yeah. I mean, also it's stages of life, right? I mean, when I look back at, you know, activism and, you know, you were active at a younger age with, you know, with your work. And maybe that was a time that you were more on the front lines and you were more about breaking news, right?
Totally. And that's, I mean, life is lived in seasons. And I mean, if your 20s are not for testing who you are, then I don't know what they're for. Like I'm a big believer in the like seasons of life, specifically in the West, where your teenage years are your brain absorbing what society expects you to be. Your 20s are you trying to live up to that expectation. Well, no, let me go back. When you're 8, 9, and 10, you are who you are. You love what you love and you don't actually care what anyone thinks. You love unicorns or you love dinosaurs and it doesn't matter. Then your brain comes online, your social brain, and your middle school is awkward. The only reason it's known as awkward is because all of a sudden you realize everyone can see you and you care what they think. So then from that point on, through your teens, you're absorbing what you think everyone expects of you. Then, of course, in your 20s, you try to be that. And then as you get into your later 20s, not everybody, this is just a general pattern I've noticed. In your late 20s, you start to realize, this doesn't work for me. I have like dedicated all my energy to this thing that feels empty and feels wrong. And I miss the freedom of being 10 years old when I just liked what I liked. And then a lot of us spend the rest of our lives peeling back all of those things that our anxious 14-year-old brain told us to be.
It's so true. And getting back to the things, you know, believing in unicorns, if that's where it's at.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I very much am in the midst of that myself, getting back to like, okay, what is it that I really care about and what brings me joy? You know?
Yeah. And also forgiving, because sometimes the negative influence on your life also might have accidentally brought you into a strength that is now something you're very proud of. Like for me, I would say, I don't want anyone to be oppressed for their queerness. I wish that would all go away. But that oppression in me, as far as I can tell, turned me into a writer. Because when I was 14 and I realized something is maybe 13, when I realized something was different about me and it has a name and that name is synonymous with being bad, my defense mechanism was disassociation, but disassociation with curiosity for safety. So all of a sudden, I flew out above, looking down like a drone on everybody. And I was like, okay, for some reason, the way you are is not okay, but you didn't choose it. You have no control over this. So something's going on. So you need to understand everyone's experience and how they got there and the moving parts of all of this so that you can figure out where you fit in and where you can be safe. And so my brain became obsessed with how the world is the way that it is, which I completely believe turned me into a writer.
Yeah. And, that you raise a really good point about, the things that shape us that maybe come from, less than ideal circumstances. But ultimately, I feel like that. I feel like my advocacy for women came from immense suppression as a kid and of being judged and criticized and put in a box as a young woman. And I became really dedicated to creating space for women to speak. And interestingly enough, anger actually is what motivated so much of my work.
Yeah.
And when that anger dissipated and I had done enough to let it go, I was worried I wouldn't be motivated. So what's gonna be the engine that fuels this? Because my anger is gone and I don't really care anymore about what people have to say. And that's when my relationship to advocacy changed, because it became for me and not fuck you to everybody that I felt oppressed by.
Yeah, I think that's one of the gifts of youth, like the gifts to society and progress is that youth are angry. And then hopefully, on the path to enlightenment, they calm down and they see the importance of all the different things and why things are the way they are. But the benefit of that messy nature is that it does drive us forward. They're on the front lines and they don't understand the complexity and they don't give a fuck. They're like, okay, I'm sorry that it's complex. Stop killing people. Stop denying women this and that. I don't care if there's a reason. Just stop, which is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you stay angry your whole life, I don't know,
you're going to get sick.
Yeah. Your hair falls out.
Yeah. And, some awful stuff definitely helps. Let's go back and talk about writing, because you are a full-time writer, and I'm curious because I know you teach writing. Do you think that writing is something that is a God-given talent or not? Whatever is a talent that you're necessarily born with, or is it something that someone that has no clue how to do it can actually learn how to do it really well?
I think if you can speak, you can write. And there are many techniques to write better, write more clearly. But I do believe that certain brains, because to write interestingly, you need to think interestingly.
Right.
You need to speak interestingly. You need to see the world from a slightly askew angle, which causes, but askew but familiar, because it causes people to be like, whoa, what an interesting perspective.
But it's not alienating.
Exactly. It's just 2 degrees different. And you can't imitate that. I mean, there is a lot of advice in the creative world where my very good friend who's a fashion designer, he said, imitate until you understand and then go forth. He very much believes in imitation. So I would say to a beginning writer, imitate all you want. But another great quote, which I got from Lydia Davis, which she got from someone else, which is, don't try to be original. Try to work on your character and yourself and speak honestly, and you will be original.
Yeah, I really understand that. It's perspective.
Yeah.
My book that I wrote, it's Messy. That's the name of it. I narrated the whole book because I can speak. I do that for a job. I've been doing that since I'm 15 years old. I can speak. And so I just narrated the whole thing. And then I edited from there. That's how I got it from my brain into a device in order to be able to edit it. And that worked for me.
Well, I think the blank page is the scariest thing in the world, and getting anything, you can't mold without clay. You have to get the clay there, and the clay can be a huge blob. Who cares? But you've got something to mold. And so just speaking to narrate, if you just talking into your phone can get something. I do that actually a lot I'm very, I'm a servant of the arrival of an idea. And a lot of times it happens like right as I'm falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do not write it down right then, of course it's gone. And so I'll just say, hey Siri, take a note. And then she goes bling, 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 or whatever. The phone lights up. And then I'll just say whatever I said and then go to sleep. And then I'm like, I'll wake up. I'll be like, oh yeah, I told her to write something down.
Thank God. Rachel, you write every day, don't you?
I do. I write every day. And I'm curious, in your writing, and because I've listened to so much of it now, I listen to books more than read them these days. But do you feel like your work is about exposing to the truth to yourself about yourself? And then, or maybe exposing the truth of the world to yourself and then showing it to the world?
I think that I write because I am a double extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
I get my energy from others and I think by speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I am quiet, there are no thoughts. It's just like sloshing water in a bucket. There's things going on, but I don't know what it is. But the moment I start talking, I'll be like, oh, that's what I think about that.
Yeah.
Which is why I literally just on Facebook Marketplace, I moved to a new little cabin and I bought a gas fire pit because I had a fire pit at my old place. For 8.5 years, we sat around that thing and every single thing I've ever written came from that fire pit, sitting with my friends, having a little mezcal and talking until 2 a.m, like all the time. And so then I moved to this place and it's so cute and tiny and like old 1911 wooden cabin. And I was like, I need to sit around a fire. So I thank God for Facebook Marketplace. I found this awesome one for $150 and it's so cute. And now I've got it because that is just talking and figuring out. And I don't know what I think. Oh, I can feel what I think. I can feel discomfort. There'll be a conversation in culture or or an energy between two friends. I haven't found words for it, but I can feel a little funk or I can feel a little excitement or I can feel whatever that is. And until someone asks me about it or I talk about it or I bring it up, all of a sudden it locks into reality and language, or it locks into language and I can feel that's not quite right. Let me rephrase that. And I'm looking for it. And to me, the hack of all time was figuring out that I could be a writer and do that for a living and define what I think. And in so doing, tell other people and liberate them to do the same thing.
Yeah. In your workshops, are you teaching people to write?
So I'm teaching people. So good writing is clear thinking. And so like, I'm just helping people get in that position. And so I don't feel equipped to be like, this is a gerund and a participle and never do this. Like I'm up there trying to inspire the feeling of you are worthy to write. Because a lot of people are like, why me? And so I'm like, that 2% askew angle on reality, every single original human being on this planet has that too. No one's ever been exactly you. No one has ever seen the life from exactly your shoes. And so you have access to the universal truth in a uniquely you way. And you don't know that the key of your life opens a specific door, that there are people that cannot learn but from your voice. Like you have an angle where they've read all these other books, and until you say it the way only you can say it, they won't get it.
How did you get there where you can say that with so much confidence?
I think it's because I've read a lot of books where like so many people have given me books. They'll give me a book and they go, this book changed my life. And I will read this book and I go, this book is dog shit.
Yeah. Yes.
Or I don't feel anything about this book.
Yes.
Or I give someone a book and I'm like, this book changed my life. And they're like, I can't get past page 40. I just don't care.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you?
Yeah. What is wrong with you? Yes.
And I'm just like, okay, well, somebody is going to read my words because I mean, one of the greatest things whenever you release a book, I don't know if you've done this, is if you ever like notice that you've got some 1-star reviews, go to your favorite author Go to Joan Didion, go to John Steinbeck, and read the Amazon reviews of The Grapes of Wrath. He won the Nobel Prize. There are 1,000 one-star reviews.
That is a great tip. I'm going to do that because
your heroes have one-star reviews.
Yeah, it's messy. My book has a bunch of one-star reviews, so I'm going to go do that. Thank you.
It's just like the exact angle with which you see the world will be helpful. And for me, the reason I started writing was that I pictured my queer, deep in the evangelical church self dreaming of a specific book. Like I want to write a book that he would read, and it would get him maybe a little faster to loving himself and living the life he wants to lead. And so I'm going to write to him. And that's what I've always done. I always write to him, and I write to me in the past or young me. And that really helps because I don't really actually care who reads. I don't know who's going to read it. Or, I mean, I want them to so I can have a job, but I'm really just doing that for him. And so it is so cool when I get an email or a direct message from a 22-year-old gay boy in Alabama who is like, this is exactly me. It is very profound.
Yeah, I love that you are writing for different versions of yourself. You created the book that you wish you had.
Yeah.
Right? And anyone else who may be in the situation that you were in is hearing that voice, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that commission stands for everybody. I don't think everyone has the pull to write a book. I think everyone has the pull to be heard. I think
definitely
that's a human desire. And writing a book feels like such an on-the-nose way to do that.
I was just going to add that I am not a 13-year-old gay boy from Alabama, but I related so much with your journey in coming from fundamentalism of Christianity and feeling like that little gay boy in those rooms as a child. And so even, I think my message to you is like, even if it's not the little gay boy, it's like, it's also like the straight girl who's like, where the fuck do I belong?
Well, that's
because I look like I'm supposed to belong.
Yeah. I think you prove the universal through the specific, and the more specific you get, if it's the truest, true small story, can be amplified a million times. Just like inhale and exhale is a metaphor for all of life. Your specific experience is a metaphor for true things. If you tell the truth, if you sanitize and turn your story into propaganda for your own ego, you're not actually listening to the transposed chords of reality and making a song. You're like making false noise to prop up your fragile ego. So I think just a true story. I mean, one of my dear friends is a straight girl raised in like a very formal Jewish, fundamentalist Jewish background. And, you know, she's unmarried at 40, and the rejection she feels from her family is so similar to mine. Like, what is wrong with you? Why do you bring shame on our family?
Yes.
When will you realize that we were right? And I didn't even think that we were the same. And she's like, I'm sobbing reading this book. I'm like, oh, interesting.
Well, what you're talking about as well is a commitment to the truth and to vulnerability. And those two things are what many people spend their life avoiding on a daily basis in large ways and in tiny little ways. So the invitation to be, to lay things bare in the work that we create is, for me, it's the same. I can't do anything but tell the truth. I don't know how to be in a situation where you're asking me to withhold the truth. I can't do it. So I'm sort of largely not really hireable because of this. I get into all kinds of trouble because I'm like, I have to tell the truth, and I've found many different ways to do it and wrap it up and that kind of stuff. But I am committed to that as well. And that is where I've seen the most impact and the most connection created, is when I'm willing to really allow myself to be seen, which is what I hear at the core of what you're talking about.
Well, and the urgency to tell the truth really comes from when you didn't.
Yes.
And it poisoned you. Like
Mm-hmm.
my time in the closet. I mean, the toxic experience of believing that something is wrong with you and trying and knowing in your heart of hearts that it's not,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to fit into a world that you fear there's going to be a gotcha moment. They're going to find this out about you, and everything that you've invested in is going to come tumbling down, is such a toxic way to exist. And like living with that embodied toxicity for so long, it is now like, I mean, the reason I'm like a vulnerable confessional memoirist, and it's just like I tell all the truth at all times, is because it's my act of rebellion against that experience. I'm like, I will never have a gotcha moment again.
Yeah.
I will tell you everything
Yeah.
that I've ever done, because I'm like, I can't live like that.
Yeah, I completely understand. Let's talk about Mother Nature. Two topics you speak about a lot, your
Mhm.
mom and nature combined in one book. Can you give us a very brief synopsis of the book for people who are listeners who have not had the opportunity to read it yet, because it isn't out, but it will be any day.
So, yes, it comes out November 7th, so very soon. So it's about my mother and I, who have a very complicated relationship, which is not rare. My mom is an evangelical, conservative, Christian, Southern woman, and I am a liberal, coastal elite, snowflake, gay man. And the book originated from two rivers flowing into one, which is one being my mom is in her mid 70s, and that realization, well, you're like, wow, like mid 70s is old. Like, and my mom feels immortal. Like a mother is so, and she's always been in such good health and all these things. And it was just this really jarring realization of, oh, I go home 2 or 3 times a year. The average American woman lives to be 78. I might see my mom 12 more times. Like, and it just dawned on me one day, and I was like, oh God, that was like very profound. And so I wanted to know her and spend intentional time with her. There's two selves, the experiential self and the narrative self. The experiential self is do whatever you want, whenever you want. The narrative self is be like the overarching story of your life. Be the person, like, are you the type of person that? Are you the type of person that? And so I'm like, I want to be the type of son that I want to not regret my relationship with my mother, even though it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I've really observed, this is a long elevator pitch. I've really observed how many families have deep rifts over politics, over religion, that is like really new in a way where the classic, at the dinner table, we don't talk about politics or religion, like that civility of like in the family, we get along even though we don't agree, and how that has been thrown out the window. And it's like, get on my side or burn. You're destroying the
today
world.
More than in the last few weeks, more than ever.
Yeah. So
I mean,
and how families have fallen apart and relationships have fallen apart, and how sad that is. And how I don't like, it's so funny. Like all the great wisdom teachers preach against this, and it's like every generation we forget it. And I'm and observing that and having my friends in these fire pit talks say, it's really interesting the way you and your mom are so close. You like love hanging out with each other, and you couldn't be more opposite. And not just opposite, but like she doesn't endorse your sexuality. She thinks it's sin. Like she's like not coming to your wedding one day, like your mother. That hurts. And I'm like, it very much hurts. It's the most painful thing of my life. And yet I am in relationship with her because I want to be the type of person that is in relationship with his mother. And I love her. I do.
And you're doing that for you as well.
Yes.
Because ultimately you've got to feel good with yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So this book is just a examination of my relationship with my mother and the place we are at as a society and a country through that specific lens. And my mom is also hilarious. So it's just like a funny portrait of these like two quirky characters. The framework of the book is my mom actually walked across America in the 70s with my dad, and it was like very famous. They were on the cover of National Geographic. It was like a big deal. And this was always this like legendary story growing up, but then they got a divorce and like, you know, it all fell apart. And so there was a tinge of sadness. And so I was like, I just want to know who you were when you were 30. So let's retrace your steps.
Was she up for it? What did she say when you were like, oh, hey, I have this crazy idea, Mom?
Yeah. Well, and I was like, I want to write a book about it. And my mom, even though she knows I write about her in a complex way, she's so wonderful. She's just down. She's like, okay, you know.
Has she read this book?
Oh yeah. She was the first person to read it.
Really? What did she say?
She was like,
because let's not forget that you write your truth and in vulnerable, exposing ways. That includes for your mother too.
Yeah. But I do not, something you'll learn if you ever go to one of my writing seminars is that you do not write from your wounds, you write from your scars. And I believe you should never have a mean thing to say about anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to write specifically about someone I love. If they are reading the story, I've portrayed them so realistically that they think they're the hero of this book.
That's a skill.
And so I've written it in a way where it's almost like choose your own adventure. Like I'm a belligerent narrator who's so annoying and Mom is standing in her faith and whatever. Or she is blinded by her faith and I am like the generous son. It's like you choose your own adventure.
Was there anything on this trip that you kept out of the book?
No. It was so the hardest conversation maybe I've ever had in my life I had on this trip. And it was so hard to write because I feared having this conversation with my mom for 20 years. And I knew I probably never would. I live in California. I can avoid all these things. There's all these things we don't talk about. But I knew that in my narrative self, I want to. I'll regret not knowing where she lands. And so thank God I'm a writer because you have this like journalistic push. You know, it's like, I would never go to the front of a war zone, but if you give me a camera and a press badge and it's for the New York Times and it's important, I'll feel a different type of way.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, I need to have this conversation for this book or I'm a coward. And so I put the truth of my own life in the way of my like book so that the book bulldozed over me and forced me to do it. And so
I really want to ask you what the conversation was, but it may be something that you want to keep for the book.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it in the book.
Yeah, I think
because it's juicy.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet it is. I respect you choosing to get to know your mother in this way. Last year my dad died, and it was truly one of the most devastating and profound experiences that I've ever gone through in my life, and you know, I say this with such love that, you know, the parting gift that my dad gave me was myself. And I couldn't have had that experience had were he still alive, because there is something about, you know, getting to know your parent in a whole other way. And my dad was, from the day he was diagnosed with cancer, pancreatic cancer, until the day that he died, it was 18 months. And I spent a huge amount of time getting to know him and learning about him in ways that I wouldn't have were he not given a terminal diagnosis. And so I love that you elected to do this without the threat of imminent death. You know?
Yeah.
I really love that you did that.
Yeah, I think I'm very aware of the person that I want to be. I don't know why I am that way. I just want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And this might be a side effect of in the gay world is called the best boy syndrome. I don't know if you've heard this, which is when you are when you are made to be less than and you wake up in a world where you're in trouble by the very nature of your being.
Mm.
You decide, oh, I'm bad just by existing. I'll show you. I'm going to be the best boy. I'm going to be valedictorian. I'm going to start companies. I'm going to be the buffest. I'm going to be the most. I'm going to know the most about the Bible. I'm going to, as a defense mechanism, you become the best boy to prove your worth because you realize that something innate in you is unworthy. And I wonder if my obsession with being a good person and living a good life is somewhere rooted in there. And so this is where I like really think about, I don't know if you said go back in time and remove things from your life, you know, heal them. I'm just like, okay, well, I heal them now, but that made me who I am. I don't know. There's a John Muir quote which says, if you go and try to pull anything out by itself, you find it hitched to everything else in the universe.
Yeah.
No, that's beautiful.
That's right.
So I don't know. I don't even know.
I love that phrase, best boy. I mean, when I was speaking earlier about anger motivating me to create everything I've created in my life, it was like, you know, I too grew up with, you know, a lot of public shaming and, you know, God forbid you're like, you know, fuckable and smart and entrepreneurial and funny and, you know, and successful, like you are going to get annihilated.
Yeah.
You know, and that was my, you know, young adult life. And, you know, and I think like I got married at 19 to be like, see, I'm not a threat to all of your husbands and boyfriends that want to fuck me. See, because now I'm married to someone at 19. And then at 20, I'm going to have a kid so that I'm really not desirable because look what happened to my body. Like I did all these things that kind of made me safe and not a threat so that I wasn't bad. And that carried on for years and years until I had enough recovery to go, no, who am I to not be all that I am? I am doing myself and the world a disservice to put pieces of myself away so that other people are comfortable. And I stopped having to be that. I don't know what the girl version of that is, but I really relate to that in a big way.
Yeah. It's so fun and interesting to be on the curious side of like self-discovery and realize that as you read more and you learn more, like everybody in every scenario, there is a reason for everything. Like there is a cause. I remember reading The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, Bessel van der Kolk, one of the leading trauma experts. For anyone who doesn't know, that is one of my Bibles.
Yeah, and I remember in that book, he talked about the surprising finding that so many people who were morbidly obese had experienced sexual abuse as a child. And like there was just a potential through line that they created their body subconsciously to be undesirable as a form to protect themselves.
Yes.
And then when they did have gastric bypass or whatever, and they lost weight, it unlocked a fear that they had locked so far down of the trauma. And that was so interesting to me. I'm like, God, every single thing has a cause, which makes you pause when you're angry and frustrated and mocking someone else or whatever it is. It makes you pause. Like, there is a cause and it's probably tender.
Yeah, it actually brings me to a question I have for you now, which is at the beginning of your second book, in the introduction, you talk about having 105 fever for, was it weeks?
Yeah.
Before your first book came out. And I read that as this somatic expression of all of these things that were packed under the surface that were suddenly like, holy fuck.
It was so interesting to me because I am so cerebral. And I think that has a lot to do with, this episode is called The Reasons Why. That has a lot to do with the fact that as I realized that my body was getting me in trouble, like my arousal and who I'm attracted to, it makes me bad. So let me go full cerebral. And so I actually have a very strong wall between my mind and my heart. At least, or not my heart. I would say my mind and my heart are friends. My mind, my heart, and my body. My body is like the wires are frayed or they're blocked or unplugged. And like, I was just talking about this the other day. Like, I cannot, this is very true and vulnerable, but like, I will not visually get a boner from seeing a hot guy like in a locker room at whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, I was like, that's so interesting. Like people are like, aren't you worried you're going to like get a boner with your friends or whatever? And I was like, I never did. And my body knew, you better shut that off.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For
You
safety.
better turn that fucking shit off.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to actually get sexually aroused, the person has to be very overt and there has to be intimate, like obvious, long flirting. Like I have to, it takes me a while to get there because the body is like,
this is not safe.
this is not, you can't have a visual symbol of your attraction around these people or it could be bad.
Wow. How has that been for you healing that?
It's been long. It's been,
Yeah.
I mean, I was so delayed in my like sexual, I mean, I had my first boyfriend at 30. I had my first kiss at 28. I was like very delayed.
Did you sleep with women before that?
No, I've always been extremely gay.
Because I have gay friends that have slept with
Yeah.
women in an attempt to fit into heterosexual culture. And I have one friend who every time he slept with a woman, he would get some like insane hives all over his like genitals, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, wow, your body was just telling you, like, get out of here, dude.
Yeah.
You know?
The body, I mean,
The body keeps
the
score.
score.
Yeah.
And so before my first book came out, I had this mystery illness where I woke up and I had 105 fever. I would sleep on 6 towels because I would sweat and shake all night.
Like
So
a menopausal
bad.
woman.
Yeah, and I would peel one towel back, and I would sweat through that one, and peel another one back, and I lost 25 pounds in a month, and like I couldn't figure out what it was. It was so, and one of my very dear friends is an ER doctor, so he was on text with me, and like he is so calm. He's an ER doctor, like nothing you could say anything, and he's so calm. And then about 2 weeks in, he started to get not calm.
You were like, oh shit.
He was like, there is a full regimen we need to go down to figure out what this is. You might have full-blown AIDS. You might have full cancer. I got it. All like your body is trying to cook something out of you, and there's a lot of things it could be. And it was, and then Connie Britton was the first person to tell me, I think it's psychosomatic. I think you're stressed about your mom and it's coming out in your body. And I was like, put your crystals away. It isn't, I'm like, get your woo-woo la-la out of here.
And then knowing Connie would double down.
Yeah. She's like, eat shit and go to this doctor. Anyway.
By the way, I texted her this morning to say I was interviewing you today. She was so excited.
She is the best.
She is the best. I asked her to tell me something about you that wasn't found on the internet. And that was last night. And she was like, I'm out trick-or-treating. I'm going to get back to you in the morning with it.
Cute. No, she doesn't care.
I mean, she doesn't. She loves you and she loves me, but she's like, you'll work it out. I know you will.
Yeah.
She was like, you know what you're doing.
She's hosting my book talk at Vroman's next week.
I know.
like
I'm going to
book
come
launch.
because I live in Pasadena.
Oh, yeah. And like, it was such an easy ask because we have such a bitchy rapport. Like, it's so fun to rip on each other. But she's the perfect blend of viciously witty and tender and angelic. And that combo is like my favorite combo. So it'll be a fun night. Anyway, she was the one who told me, I think it's your anxiety about this book coming out and you're worried. So the reasons why, I think part of the reason that anxiety existed is because I don't know if you remember the documentary that was on YouTube called Coney 2012. It was this, I worked at a charity called Invisible Children. We made this documentary, Coney 2012. We were so proud of it. We're trying to get the world to care about these child soldiers and stop Joseph Kony from abducting them. We worked on it for 10 years. We made 11 documentaries and we had hundreds of thousands of students in high school clubs. And we had just been so big-hearted and worked our asses off making this film. Then it came out, became the most viral video of all time at that time, 100 million views in 6 days or whatever. And it exploded. And then there was a huge backlash of people being like, who are you? They're stealing money. Which none of it was true.
Yeah, I remember all
They're
this.
scamming you. And then all the backlash and the scam conversation caused our founder, one of my best friends, to have a mental breakdown, which was then filmed and put on TMZ. which then,
No.
and so basically this huge success in putting something out into the public destroyed a nonprofit that I had dedicated 5 years of my life and many of my friends 10 years of their lives to, and employed hundreds of Ugandans and Central African Republicans and all that is just, so I was scared of putting something into the world because once you give something away, you don't,
Yeah, it's not yours anymore.
it's not yours anymore.
No.
And the last time I did that, it destroyed lives
Yeah.
and also saved lives and raised a lot of money and did a lot of good things. But I had just, when you're like in a niche world, like the nonprofit world, and we'd made all these documentaries and it was just purely beautiful. Like kids were inspired. We were building schools in Uganda. We were helping lead LRA children out of the jungle to be returned to their families. Like it was just across the board gorgeous. And to have, and when we got the backlash and it was so, it was so horrible, all of our like the Obama administration and Samantha Power and these people that have worked in that world, they didn't skip a beat. They're like, of course.
Yeah, that's part of what it is.
45% of Americans want me dead. Duh.
Yeah.
But we didn't know that feeling. That's
And the thick skin that you need to have in order to do that often is not aligned with a heart that is motivated to do that work in the first place.
It made me respect people who are at the front lines of that world, where if you are taking a political stance in a public way and you are going against vested interests that want it the other way, that is so emotionally taxing and it just get, so that's a whole back wrap around to why I think the fear of this thing coming out. And I was worried, what if everybody turns on my mom? What if they're online ripping on her?
Right. Very real fear.
And then I've hurt her in the pursuit of my career. I was just worried. And so, but in my mind, I'm just like, it'll work out. I'm optimistic. Like I was fair to her, blah, blah, blah. My body was like, this could go horribly wrong.
And I love what you spoke about with your book, which is that in Mother Nature, you're holding two truths. You can love your mother and she can be disapproving and you can have completely different perspectives and you're role modeling a relationship. And I think that as a culture, we are incredibly inexperienced at holding two truths. It's one or the other. And your book is so timely because we're in the middle of this extremely polarized experience with Palestine and Israel. And so many friendships are going down the drain. So many communities are getting taken apart. I have Palestinian friends and Israeli friends, and it has been a real education, this one, and we're still in the midst of it, right? But being able to role model that you can hold multiple truths at the same time, there is a lack of experience with that in our culture. And, like you said, people want it to be one thing or the other, and it just isn't.
I know. I mean, the current war is so difficult because it is so far from my experience. And so
Same.
And yet, like you, I have Israeli and Palestinian friends who are so sincerely devastated and freaking out. So it fries my circuits because I am a let the dust settle and see what happened person. And the dust is fucking bad right now.
Yeah.
And so
we're in a nuclear fallout.
Yeah. And so, because what I was going to say is people ask me, okay, well, how, like, you're in a relationship with your mother, but what happens when like your mom won't speak to you? They kicked you out of the house because you're queer. Like, what now? And so there is a spectrum where I'm saying, like, I believe in my life, it is worth having an uncomfortable, imperfect, loving relationship with my mother because I love her and she loves me. And I can see that she is doing the best she can to love me in the way that she believes is correct. And to me, there is almost like an equal power dynamic. Like if my mom was Marjorie Taylor Greene, I would be like, you are actively trying to take rights away from me and you have the power to do so.
Well, that's an interesting question, actually, if I think about it. Like, I don't know that you wouldn't find a way to have a relationship with your mom, even if she was
I know, the thought experiment. I know.
it would be harder. There would be another level of what you had to overcome.
Yeah, because it's who do you want to be in the world?
Yeah. Well, that's so the advice I gave to this person who said, what do I do when my family kicks me out? Is I said, you cannot be responsible or change anyone else's mind. You cannot labor over there. All you can do is be proud of yourself and be the person you want to be. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me this question and I go, you send your parents flowers on their birthday, you send them Christmas cards, you write them letters, you send them love, and let your love be poisonous to their righteousness. Mm-hmm. Let it corrode their righteousness because there is a heart in them maybe that longs for their child. And to see that this child wants relationship, because I mean, at least in the queer example, these people, they were taught that the gay lifestyle is deadly. And then in the 80s, the AIDS epidemic proved it.
Yeah.
So they're like,
confirmation bias.
Confirmation, done. Like God will not be mocked, And so that takes a lot of deprogramming for them not to fear that their child is going to die because they watched on the news millions of these people die. I understand that.
You can have compassion for that.
I really do. But I will say, like, in my experience, I stand strong in my truth, and I think the power dynamic is pretty equal. And so I don't fear my mom taking away my rights. I just fear her making me uncomfortable.
Very different.
It's
things.
different.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm advocating for, if you are in that window where the reason that you do not have a relationship with a parent is because of discomfort, not because of actual fear. Mm-hmm. If you can parse that out, it might be worth being big and trying to be in relationship with them if they want it.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. My mom has openly, told me, I'm so sad that you're going to hell.
Yeah.
And when I think about that as a mother myself who has a daughter, I can't
Why are you going to hell, according to your mom?
Because I'm not a Christian.
Right.
Or I'm not a Christian in the way
that she
deems Christianity. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about, if I were to think that about my own child, how painful that must be to really believe that your child is going to burn in hell for an eternity.
Yeah.
I can't imagine an analog. It would be like your daughter comes home from college and says, I am obsessed with fentanyl.
Yeah.
And I use it reasonably and I love it. And you would say, baby girl. And she's like, you don't get it. It's different now.
Oh.
It would be so hard.
Yes. And so that I can have compassion for.
Yeah. That's what my mom thinks the gay lifestyle is like low dose fentanyl.
That example actually gives me chills.
Same. What is your relationship to God?
So I love this question because one of the things that was so triggering in my deconstruction, and what I mean by deconstruction is now like a buzzword in the Christian community as like people who were diehard and like born again, Jesus saved me from my sins and gave me eternal life, to slowly taking the pieces down and being like, why is it so certain? Why is it so exclusionary? Why is it like this? Why were we interpreting the Bible like that? And it's this slow piece by piece removal of all these dogmas that no longer fit with the reality as it's experienced. And so, but one of the things which is so funny and a theme is Christians want to know, are you on our tribe or are you not? Mm-hmm. Are you a Christian? And like, I remember they would say, like the code was, do you love Jesus?
Code? That's pretty blatant.
Yeah, but it was a way to say it without being like, are you an evangelical Christian?
Right.
It was like a sweet way. And I remember one time a group of girls, I was in Argentina on my bike trip, and they had followed me on my bike trip on Instagram, and they met me in Argentina because I did a little like meetup randomly because one of them DM'd me, and they were college girls, and they all like circled around me, glowing faces, and they were like, do you love Jesus? And I said, yeah. And they clasped hands, jumped up and down, their blonde hair bouncing. They were weeping. He does. We're going to be in heaven with Jedediah. Like they were so
Oh my
amped.
gosh.
So it was like all of a sudden I was on their team.
Yeah.
And there were all these words that would show that you're not on the Christian team. So like if someone said, oh, I'm so grateful to the universe. You said universe.
Yeah.
You didn't say God.
Yeah, that's me. I say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they're listening for these cues.
It's like when you're in
cues.
recovery and you say like, oh, you're a friend of Bill's.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's all like the code words,
There's code words and ways to figure out if you're on the team.
Yeah.
And so the certainty thing is like, and there's a lot of times where I want to answer that question of like, yes, I still believe in God and I love God. Even though my definition of God is so expansive now and so open-handed, I like to use that word if I'm being honest, because if I don't, my 22-year-old self will turn this podcast off because he's been trained to not listen to people. Like you need to, if you want to help somebody step away from a cult, you need to speak their language and like earn their trust and then sprinkle breadcrumbs out.
Yes.
You can't just bust the door down. They've got too much invested.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that in recovery when I'm sober a very long time and when I speak to people who are still actively using and have expressed that maybe they have a problem and they need help stopping, that's how I do it too. You know, it's like you relate with the shared experience and then you drop the breadcrumbs.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the way that humans.
It's so people don't feel judged and they feel safe. And the truth is they aren't judged and they are safe because I did stand where you're standing and I'm now standing somewhere else, you know, and that it's real, that feeling, you know, it is real. But your definition of God, you said, has expanded. Do you feel comfortable with your concept of who that God is for you now? Because I'm sure that like being able to connect with your desire has also been a journey.
Yeah, I think that my current relationship to God is just a friendly, open-hearted curiosity and a belief that whatever is so interesting. And to me, things that are interesting are lovely. Mm-hmm. It's like, I just love like when a new image from the James Webb telescope comes back and it's like seeing things that the human eye did not evolve to see. We cannot see that. And it is so gorgeous. And I'm like, why is this gorgeous? It could look ugly, okay, because we didn't evolve. So there's no reason for it to be beautiful. It just is. And it's like, that is so cool. And so I just like have this like open-hearted, I mean, there's I think Carl Sagan said, I don't know who said it first, maybe him, that we are the universe waking up to experience itself. Mm-hmm. So like consciousness is the randomness of atoms works together to create consciousness so that the universe could call itself beautiful, which I think is like,
poetic.
I love that. And I feel that. I feel like the universe calling itself beautiful. And so that is, whatever that is, I'm just down. And if it has an anthropomorphic like consciousness that loves me, cool.
Yeah.
And if it's so much bigger that it's the difference between me and an ant, and I can like love an ant and it has no idea what I'm doing, but I can just be like, you're so cute. And it can see me and it knows I'm alive too. But the difference between us is so vast that it doesn't even make sense to talk about it. That feels more true. That's great too.
Yeah.
What do you hope people will experience with this next book, with Mother Nature, that's about to go out in the world?
I think it's what Rachel said, which is like, no matter if this is your exact experience or not, it is a true experience. And everybody, I write about this, where everyone has a relationship with their mother that must be accounted for. Whether you were abandoned and that abandonment needs to be accounted for, whether you were nurtured, whether the nurture was imperfect, whether you were neglected in some way. Neglect can be subjective. I mean, it's just, there is a relationship that needs to be accounted for. And in that accounting, you learn about yourself And just like you said, where you were finally free to be you when your dad passed away, there is a shadow that parents cast that is so universal. And it is so animating to so many of us, and we don't always know it, but you feel it, your body feels it, which is why you go home for the holidays and you feel so intense about everything. Mm. They ask you, how is your friend Judy? And you're like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. That is my 17-year-old daughter right now. That is Ella when I'm like, sweetheart, what would you like for lunch? She's like, oh, can you just stop talking to me? I'm feeling so overwhelmed by you right now. You're like, oh my God.
Like, what? But I just think like investing in that and in the narrative self of who is the person that you want to be in this life. And there are going to be major relationships where there is destructive differences between you. And are you being the person you want to be? I think these are just important conversations that I want people to have. And this is a short, cute book that will just get you there and help, if you do it in a book club or whatever, it'll just help that conversation bubble up.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for exploring your mom. Thank you for exploring and reckoning with how you relate to her, because it does teach us all. I am in constant mystery of how to love my own mom and also be congruent in myself.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. That is everything we have for today.
Goodness. I've just had the best time. It's so, I haven't even, it's funny to have headphones on and like equipment, and I'm just like completely lost in our conversation. I don't know what time it is. I don't know where I am.
It's
you. It's very cool.
And whenever you get your fire pit installed, I really would love to come and sit next to it.
Amen.
And chat.
Absolutely.
Me too.
It's imminent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the co-host thing was great.
Oh, good. It's working.
Perfect.
I was worried that I wasn't leaving enough space for you.
I felt fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Bravo.
All right. Let's shut
Bada
this
bing.
bitch down. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you would like to learn more about Rachel Hall, please go to rachelhallbodymind.com. If you would like to read Jediah's new book, Mother Nature, you can get that wherever you buy your books. And if you'd like to connect with me about this episode and every episode of the conversation moving forward, please join my brand new community, amandadecadene.substack.com. There I will be connecting with you, my listeners, about each episode, sharing some exclusive content, things that did not make it into this episode, and having live chats about each of the shows. So I hope you'll join me there. And as always, please, if you have a minute, leave me a review, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And thank you for listening.